Hello ladies and gentlemen, Deja Vu here bringing another StarCraft commentary. It's set 3 between SK1 and Samsung Con. This series is tied 1-1 with wins by turnover best and Bisu over Grape. So we see some of the support players from Samsung Con starting off the series and splitting with two of the big guns for SK1, so that's got to be considered overall. You got to look into this series right now and say, so far, Con is winning. Splitting against Best and Bisu, first two sets without bringing up either of your big guns has to be considered a very, very solid start for Samsung Con. But now we're going to get a rematch of the 2010 Bacchus OSL final, Stork versus Fantasy. Stork in the top left in teal, Fantasy in the bottom right in purple. PVT coming at you, and this is going to be a lot of fun. Certainly, that Bacchus OSL was less than inspiring, less than entertaining, a little bit less than awesome unless you are a Fantasy fan. I think most people thought that was a relatively very, very lopsided. I actually didn't think it was all that even fun to watch series, but you know, that's just my opinion. You were entitled to yours. I just didn't think that series was all fun to watch. Watching Fantasy 3-0 Stork and basically just, I mean, it was just a demolition. It wasn't even close. He just wrecked Stork like nothing else. But despite that, still over the course of their history, Stork does still have the series lead at 9-7 right now. So it's still it's very, very close. But Fantasy has the only important win, the series win in the Bacchus OSL finals, and yeah, and not to mention that, wow, okay, looking at it, Fantasy's won 4 of the last 5 games, too, including those 3 at the Bacchus OSL. So there you go, Fantasy definitely definitely has been outplaying Stork in recent times, but still, certainly, Stork, one of the best PvP tiers of all time. Still don't want to mess with him, at all, and it looks like Stork's going to 12 next year, and it's going to get countered by Wonrax Expo, it looks like, from Fantasy, and they are at cross position, and so very likely what will happen is Fantasy Scout will get onto that Nexus at the top left, just too late for him to really be aggressive with it, so he's just going to have to take his slight loss in the economics by going from the Wonrax CC and just play a little bit from behind in Fantasy's perspective, and that's really the only option that he has. There's really no way for him to even that out unless he somehow decides to scout cross position and get aggressive, and I have no idea what that means. Go Fantasy probably, but I don't know. And he's not going to be doing that. He's going over there to the top right. And so it's going to be enough time for this Nexus to get up that Stork should be able to defend anything that comes his way, gutting the double gateways out, so he will be able to create enough units to defend himself as well if there is any sort of a marine bunker rush that comes his way. And Stork getting that scout out is very, very nice, coming in with this cross position. We saw that actually, yeah, we've actually seen we saw Turn go into the middle of the map first. We've seen Stork now go cross positions, and I can't remember what Grape's scouting pattern was actually. I wonder if that's I forget what Grape's scouting pattern was, but I just noticed that it looks like all the Samsung Con players have been going across the middle of the map in this series, maybe suspecting cheese, maybe worried about cheese, checking cross positions to see what style of game plan they go for. I wonder if there's something going on over there in that house where they really want to check out the middle of the map every time they play an SKT player. It's always interesting to see what kind of game plans players and teams will come up with when they're playing as specific opponents and specific teams, what they're going to create. Always very, very fun to see. And there's the command center for Fantasy, and this looks like we're going to have a very, very passive start to this game. Double gateway for Stork, not going to be able to get aggressive with it, even though he has the core and he does the he will have Dragoons out. He will not be able to do much of anything against the Wonrax Expo that's coming in from Fantasy. So it's going to be a pretty passive game early on here, and yeah, we'll see how it develops if Stork decides to go with a 2-base play. A lot of times off of the 12 next, you'll see a lot of players go for 2-base arbs and just macro really hard off the fact that, hey, I have 2 bases, I will be able to macro off of 6+ gateways, get my tech going, and macro hard through the mid portion of the game and just try and dominate the map at that point. Yeah, that is a very common strategy to go with the 12 next strategy. We've got 4 Marines out here for Fantasy, and he's going to stop any more scouting information from coming in by any probes. 4 Marines, certainly more than enough to stop a probe scout. And there's a robotics facility as well coming in, as well as an idle probe. 2 idle probes for Stork, and there they go. Now they are working once more. But the robotics facility going to be certainly for observers, and I don't know. We can hope. We can hope that maybe we'll see some Reavers as well. Stork Reavers are very, very powerful, very, very strong. And I remember on Pathfinder, we used to see Stork go with Reavers a lot. And he took down a lot of strong Terran players on Pathfinder, a map that's supposed to be pretty darn good for Terrans just by using Reavers and going in between the bases on Pathfinder. So we have seen Stork do that very well in the past. And he does love his Reavers against Terran opponents. Fantasy actually called that in that Vakasoa cell on that first map on Gladiator. Fantasy called Bisu's or Stork's build, called the incoming Reavers, and actually got Goliaths out like ridiculously early with range, and picked off a shuttle, and it was just game over from there. It was one of those just ridiculous counters that you're just like, wow, Fantasy, I can't believe you realized that was coming your way. And then at the same point you're like, wow, Stork, I can't believe you are so predictable that you got called out like that. But it's one of those things that does happen, but it doesn't look like we're going to have that going on. We saw the observatory come up and just the gateway, so it looks like we're going to have pretty standard play here from Stork. Maybe see some Zealot bombs, but certainly nothing too crazy. I'm not going to be seeing any Reavers, at least not yet. And really, once you get past the mid-game, Reavers really drop off in the late game. They're just so micro-intensive. You have too many things to do to really be able to handle the Reavers as well as your Zealots and your Dragoons and everything else that you've got going on, especially if you start bringing in like Arbiters or something into it. The Reavers are just too micro-intensive and too easy to blow up to be used in the later stages of the game. It's basically an early and mid-game unit only, the Reaver, and so if we don't see a robotic support base thrown down very, very shortly, we're not going to be seeing any Reavers in this game. Other than that, what have you got from Fantasy? We do have some terrorist vultures wandering around the map, looking to slaughter some innocent probes and see what damage they can do to the populace of Stork. And there they go. They are off, and they're heading straight for that top left base, and it looks like that's blocked off with a really odd-looking, but I gotta think that that's actually effective pylon wall, because there's really no reason to not put down the third pylon there. So I gotta think that that is an effective wall. It just looked really, really odd. And Fantasy not gonna charge up the ramp, is he? He's thinking about it. He's got speed. He's definitely thinking about it. Throwing down some mines, and will he go for? No, but he's not going for it. He's definitely thinking about it, but he's not going to go for it. The observers are out, so they will be able to start clearing away mines really shortly. So that's kind of unfortunate for Fantasy. He throws down mines literally seconds before the observer comes up to blow them all up with the Dragoon. So a little bit unfortunate there for Fantasy, and maybe that was a gap because Stork just wandered over there. He's like, WTF, mate, did I not wall this off? Thank God Fantasy didn't wander in this side. We would have had something else to worry about. And Stork continued to go with mine clearing, and here comes a bunch of vultures coming here to try to pick off these Dragoons. Like, one mine does go off, does a lot of damage to the Dragoons, but does not pick any, only picks one Dragoon off. 2 observers out now, and all of these mines are getting cleared. So overall, I think you got to consider that that little skirmish has to be considered a little bit of an advantage for Stork. He's basically taken out all of the mines that the vultures have within them, picked off a few of them, and only lost 1 Dragoon. Granted, there is some damage on some of the other Dragoons, but overall, that's got to be considered a Stork victory. Stork does have his third base running, and he's somewhat pylon walled it off from the other side as well, basically asking to get dropshipped or to get sieged from below. But overall, since he does kind of have control of the map right now, that's pretty safe to do. He's sitting outside of Fantasy's base, so it's unlikely that you're going to see any sort of a tank push coming his way in order to harm him. We do have the third base for Fantasy up and running now as well there at the third base on the bottom right-hand corner. Looking to see what Stork does with these Dragoons. He is pushing out, cannot engage here. That bunker and those tanks are going to be way too much, cannot engage. Just start picking out the engineering bay and is going to back off as soon as the tank fires. There it is, and now Stork needs to back off. There he goes. Going to be able to keep Fantasy in his quadrant, but not really going to have much success jumping in here, unless he comes in here with the Zealot bombs, and nope, not going to even do that either. The bunker and the missile turret was going to come up really shortly, so that would have going to be very, very dangerous for him to do that. And the missile turret pops up, and the Marines inside the bunker actually pick off the observer. Looks like Stork's setting up for his 4th base up there at the 3rd base on the top right quadrant. Going to start taking that corner of the map as well, and that is really, really wise of him. He sees Fantasy go for that 3rd base, and he's unlike Best in that first game. He wasn't already economically behind, so he knows that he can essentially match Fantasy army for army in the middle parts of the game, and while at the same time getting up his 4th base. So it's very safe for him to do. It's definitely a significantly different situation than what Best was in, where he didn't scout out the 3rd base up for Fantasy until it was so late that he couldn't. I mean, he did, but it really It was just a very complicated and difficult position for best. Whereas this is much safer, much nicer overall position for Stork in this game. That is the 4th base, still halfway done. Vulture still marauding around the map, trying to terrorize Stork's probes. Not able to get too much luck, and now he does get the scan off, and he is moving up with Vultures to try and pick off some of those probes, but not going to have any luck here. His Vulture's actually getting picked off everywhere. Look at this, Vulture's getting picked off everywhere. There are no holes in Stork's defense. Stork expertly defending himself against these Vultures. Really, really impressive play. Although now the Vultures are going to get up there to the top right, and they are going to pick off a couple of probes. Not a whole lot. The Vultures have picked off several probes this game, but not a ton of probes. They certainly haven't caught the big transfer that you're always afraid of, that is just the patented fantasy GGO move, where he just comes in there, picks off 10 or 12 probes, lays down the mines, runs away, and he just laughs his way back to Agrabah. And but not going to be so in this case. Stork defending himself quite ably and starting to build up his zealot count as well now. We've seen his dragoons around the map, large numbers of them around the map, trying to counter these vultures and doing a good job of it. Now we're seeing the zealots start to appear in order to counter any sort of fantasy push out, in order to really develop any sort of offense for Stork. He needs to get that zealot count up, and that's exactly what he's doing. And here comes the big probe transfer. So now it's imperative that Stork defend against these vultures incredibly well right now, and he does manage to pick off all the vultures. There are more streaming in. The terrorist is not going to let this go. Fantasy still coming in, still sending more vultures, and Stork again defending expertly against them. This is just fantastic by Stork. Stork is blocking Fantasy left, right, left again, and down the middle here comes the vultures. They are going to pick off some probes. There are cannons up already though, and so these vultures are going to pick off a few probes, but they're all going to go down. And again, you know, overall Stork has just done a really good job of keeping the vultures out of his base, and all of these vultures are laying down mines as well. And the mines have, there's as soon as I was going to say the mines have done very little, there goes the mine, blows up and does a lot of damage to a bunch of the dragoons for Stork. But still, overall, still doing very well. Stork is up about 50 supplies. Stork is looking to get his 5th base now and just playing out of his mind, countering every move of Fantasy. This is just, I'm loving this. I'm loving watching Stork counter every little move that Fantasy makes right now. It's doing really good right now. Here comes some more vultures. Once again, Fantasy sending out more vultures, and Stork, once again, his dragoons are perfectly positioned to stop them, perfectly timed in order to stop those vultures. And I don't even know what to say anymore. You almost feel bad for Fantasy at this point. Like, he can't get anything done with his vultures. Like, he just can't do it. There's nothing to do. His vultures are here on the top right to try and counter the 6th base for Stork, and Stork is maxed out. His army is essentially maxed out at this point, so he's going to be starting to stockpile minerals and gas. Going to be able to start throwing down, he'll be able to throw down another 10 gateways there at the top right, and with his 6 bases just pumping units, he'll be able to stockpile resources. And what you'll see here from Stork is you'll see him get a few thousand minerals and start stockpiling gas. He'll get his 10 gateways or so up in the top right corner, and then once he gets that stockpile built, he'll see Fantasy's forces, he'll see Fantasy push out, and he'll just throw himself at Fantasy and try and take out as many tanks as he can, build up another force in seconds, and basically 1 round or 2 rounds of units, and he'll be almost maxed again because he'll have that many gateways, and then you'll see him do it again and again and again, and just try and overwhelm Stork. And you can see that build-up starting to happen. He's there. He's got about over 3,000 resources right now, and Fantasy building up with his double armories at the moment. And there is a dropship going to pick up some. Not going to pick up that vulture. DT's out for Stork as well. But that vulture there, that vulture drop has been seen, and where's it gonna go? There really isn't much that it can do over here. There is a cannon and a couple zealots, so the zealots are gonna try and fight off. The vulture's gonna pick off 2. And will they get the 3rd vulture? It looks like they will. And it looks like vultures are finally here. They are going to catch a bunch of the probes as they come out, and they are going to pick off a bunch of probes here at the top right. Finally, Fantasy able to do some damage with his vultures. He is going to lose a ton of them in punishment, and his vultures drop there did pick off a couple of probes as well. So a little bit of damage being done here by Fantasy, but honestly, at this point, with 6 Nexuses, or Nexi, does Stork really care if you kill half a dozen probes? I really don't think so. I really don't think he cares. His main's going to be mined out really soon, and he'll just be able to transfer out, and he'll be good to go. So I don't think that's really going to do too much. Here comes Fantasy with his push out, and Stork moving his troops here a little bit, going to lose 3 Dragoons here in the back, and they're not, oh, well, he did get a tank for it, so it could have been worse. Probably should have been a lot worse, should have gotten nothing, but mines were there, and he actually accidentally mine dragged and had other tanks shoot at his Dragoons as they were standing next to a tank. Pretty funny. And Stork here just biding his time right now, continuing to stockpile, and that is an interesting stasis, getting 1 Goliath. I think he did get the vessel as well. Yeah, he did get the vessel, and there is a second one, and here comes Stork streaming in with all of his zealots. Needs to get past the vultures, needs to get his zealots into the tank line. There are so many tanks there. Good zealot bombs here, going to catch off most of the front tanks. So most of the front tanks did go down, but that second level of tanks is so huge. That is another control group of tanks that Stork is going to have to back off for now and re-macro, and he's throwing away his Templar! No, Stork! No! No! Stork throwing away his Templar! Oh man, that was awful. That is awful. He sent his shuttle back to pick up the Templar, but it did not. He must have misclicked, or he didn't catch where his Templar were correctly, and just threw away a bunch of Storm, and that could end up hurting him big time here in this game. He's going to lose an Arbiter to a Goliath as well. Yeah, there it goes down. And so some bad things going on here for Stork. Coming in here with the Zealot Bombs once more, and these could be very, very effective. Look at those Zealots doing very, very well. Getting right in there amongst the tank line. A good D-Matrix coming in, and just so many tanks. Will there be enough Zealots to eat enough damage to pick off all of the tanks? Gonna pick off most of them, and gonna pick off that 1, and 4 or 5 tanks left. Fantasy does lose most of his tank force. And Stork continue to macro, getting some high Templar now, but these Templar don't have any Storm. He needs to load them up into the shuttle and save them until they have Storm. And he's a pro gamer. He should know exactly how many seconds he needs to wait inside of a shuttle for the energy to get there. Unfortunately, right now his army is extremely diminished right now. He does have this army in the top right, also with Zealots and Storm. Not enough Dragoons though, and he's got this army and his main as well. Kind of a precarious position for Stork. Needs to push out with those forces in the top right. Needs to get them involved in some way. Forced to use off his storms on basically nothing, or risk losing them. And it looks like right now he's just waiting for Storm. And I really want to see Stork bring those units from the top right, bring them in from behind, and try and pincer the forces of Fantasy. But it looks like he's just... There he goes. Now he is moving them across the map now. I'm going to try and bring them into position. But it looks like Vultures now are in position with some mines as well to disrupt this. And... gonna have limited success with those mines. Gonna do some damage to the Zealots, but not a whole lot. And it looks like here comes the tanks coming in here for the third base as well as for the natural expansion. And I think Fantasy has Stork has a chance here if he just bides his time and crushes this force that's outside of his natural. And he's not going to. He's going to push out right now. He is not going to be waiting for his forces to hit from behind. He's going to push out right now. Is this going to be effective? We'll have to see. Just don't. Nope, not going to be effective. He needs to come in with forces from both sides. Stork usually one of the better decision makers in the game. I really disagree with him in this situation. It looks like he was maybe trying to use that force to go for the bottom left hand base, that fourth base that Fantasy is putting up. However, I mean, he had an opportunity here to pincer this force that is natural, really cripple and force Fantasy to basically restart his army, and not able to do so. And now more of his vultures or more of his Templar are going to be caught out in the open by these terrorist vultures, and yeah, doing a great job of picking off the vulture, or picking off the Templar, but with the vulture. So Stork, in a world of hurt right now, lost a couple of nexuses, and definitely has fallen behind in this game. Money not pouring in as much as he wanted it to, and starting to have a lot of trouble with these vultures. Needs to get those Dragoon count up again. He has a lot of Zealots and he has a lot of Templar. He needs to get that Dragoon count going in order to really get the damage rolling. He still has a decent amount of money coming in here, and here comes a Storm drop. Storm moves. Storm. There it is. There's one Storm. Gonna get 8 or 9 Templar, or 8 or 9 SCVs. So he did get 9 SCVs with that nice little Storm drop there. Could have gotten more actually if he had cast that Storm just a moment earlier. Could have got... Oh, and a lucky mine does manage to pick up the DT without picking off anything else. That was dangerous. That mine, if it didn't kill the DT, or if it had blown up properly and blown up a lot of the SCVs, that could have been awful for Fantasy. But Fantasy does manage to escape there. Does get 3 of his science vessels. Was that 3? I think that was 3. 1, 2... Yeah, I think that's 3 science vessels getting stasis. But I'm not sure if it matters. Fantasy is coming in here to the top right to take off the 5th base. I'm really going to start neutering Stork's economy here. Stork really starting to struggle to deal with this. He just needs to come in here with a pincer, and I don't know why he hasn't decided to do that. Instead, it looks like he's going to use his forces from his main, going to go for the bottom left base, going to go for the money of Fantasy gonna try and make it so Fantasy has no money. However, he can't really defend. He's not defending himself properly. So it's kind of, we're getting into a really weird game right now, where Stork is choosing to just attack the money of Fantasy rather than attack the army. And Fantasy is gonna be just about mined out right now. He does have a very large army on the field as it is, and his bank is preloaded right now. On the other side, we do see Stork with a couple of bases still mining, trying to get his third up and running again. However, his forces are far fewer, and they are much more separated. So his forces are going to be far less effective, and there's the Arbiter getting picked off for nothing, unfortunately. But here comes Stork once more. Nice storm coming off on a lot of those tanks, able to do some decent damage. Needs to get a second storm, and he does, and picks off all of those tanks, or basically all of those tanks, but a nice D-matrix, and Stork needs to back off now. Cannot afford to keep wasting shots on that tank. Does manage to take it down, though, and trying to keep, make it, but with so much storm, it's just hard for Stork, or for Fantasy, to get down the ramp, and that's exactly how he's been playing that. Just trying to keep those forces on the top of this ramp, keep mining as much as he possibly can, while he gets his other base up and running, and tries to keep Fantasy just on his 3 bases. So what he's trying to do right now, Stork, is just trying to whittle away at Fantasy and hope that he's going to end up with more money with his bases that are just getting operational, and hoping that he can keep Fantasy at 0 bases. Maybe he can just whittle Fantasy away. And yeah, this game is developing very, very interestingly, and mine's going off and picking off more DTs. So it's getting a little bit, getting very, very down to the wire here. Stork's starting to run out of money as this tank here is going to take out this base at the top right. I guess this would be the 4th base. The 2nd, the natural base, the 5th base are down. The 3rd is back up and running, and the 6th base is going as well for Stork. Fantasy currently just has his 3rd mining, and it's got to be very, very low right now. Cannot be much left there. Stork's 3rd is also getting quite low. His natural does still have some money there. He'll probably just long distance mine it when the time comes, if the game should take that long. And that's it. That's going to go in there. Stork is putting up an X at the bottom left main, as I have the hiccups. Stork has lost basically all of his gateways there on the top right. Lost that reinforcement pathway, trying to control these hiccups. And I think I have to drink of water. Alright, so it looks like Fantasy feels like he's done enough damage there in the top right. I believe he took down that Nexus. No, he actually did not take down the Nexus, but he feels like he's got enough there to finish it off. I'm not sure if he actually does or not. We'll have to see. He did manage to take off the 4th base and the 5th base, so Stork's starting to hurt for cash right now as well. Both players very, very low on cash. Supply count's very, very close. But Fantasy has a bigger bank right now with that 1600 gas, and he's floating a command center over to the bottom left, and he's just going to try and hold it down. That Nexus at the bottom left has gotten scouted out. So here comes Stork to try and defend that bottom left and trying to stop this this base. And oh, good EMP catching both Arbiters, and here comes Stork going to try and catch some of these straggling units. Does manage to do so. Nice job there by Stork. Catches a few straggling units, a couple of tanks. And here comes Stork. Where's Stork going? Gotta be careful here that he doesn't get his forces. This could be really, really bad for Stork. Stork needs to retreat with his forces right now. He cannot fight here. He needs to back off, otherwise his forces will get trapped here in the bottom left-hand corner. Needs to move them back. There we go. Okay, I got a little bit worried there that Stork was going to get trapped there. If Stork gets trapped there, I mean, there's just no getting out with his army, so I'm getting very, very worried. Stork is just going to try and mine from this bottom left-hand base as much as livingly possible before Fantasy just wanders in there and just wrecks it. Fantasy does have an obscene number of tanks right now. Stork actually cannot fight Fantasy's army head on, and Vultures again are going to catch High Templar. I mean, these Vultures are ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Stork countered them for like 15 minutes in this game. The first 15 minutes of this game, the first 60% of this game, Stork countered the Vultures amazingly, but it doesn't matter. Like, they just keep coming. Fantasy's Vultures just keep on trolling, keep on trucking, and they will get you eventually. Some really, I don't even know what to say. That was amazing. That Fantasy is able to still do this. And here comes Stork once again pushing in here. Oh no, this is going to be bad. Stork losing a bunch of his units here, and he is going to get trapped. This is game. Oh man, this is going to be game, set, and match. Stork's army is trapped. Just improperly timed. Unlucky there with the timing of Fantasy's push out there. He pushed out just a little bit, and that is actually going to be game. Stork has nowhere to go with this army. He has no maneuverability. He doesn't have enough units to really break this. Basically, his only hope in this game was to try and flank Fantasy out in the open field. However, this is kind of the opposite of open field. This is kind of the one of the most closed fields that you will find, and this is just awful, awful, awful position for Stork. His main army is trapped here in the corner. The other parts of his army are just not big enough to really get involved here. He is going to try and throw up a Nexus here again at the top right for his 4th base and see if he can get that operational once more. But yeah, things are not looking good at all for Stork. He just, I mean, his army is just trapped. He just cannot compete here at all. And all he has is Zealous and Templar behind, which is actually pretty much what he wants. If he can come in here from behind, however, it looks like his, oh man, his entire frontal force is going to fall here already before his Zealots, Templars, and his few Dragoons can come into position from behind. Stork may still be able to hang in here for a little while, but Stork's position is becoming tenuous at best, barely hanging on, and yeah, starting to lose units to mines now. He just can't even, I mean, he's down 50 supply. This is getting ugly. And here comes Stork for his last hurrah. Zealot streaming in. Templar coming in behind with Storm. There's some good Storm coming on. Is it going to be enough? No, it is not going to be enough. Everything is dead for Stork. Here comes another round of Zealots. But unsieged tanks will take on Zealots. And that is that. That, as they say, is that. The Fat Lady is once again singing in this game as well. And just waiting for Stork to GG. Maybe Stork will troll Fantasy with some Fantasy GG timing and just hang on for another 5 minutes and do basically, even though he's in absolutely no position to do anything, just barely hang on and technically be alive for an extended period of time. That's about all that's really going to happen here. There's no way. I'm telling you now, there's absolutely no way Stork comes back in this game. It is not. It's not possible. Fantasy would literally have to walk away from the keyboard. Fantasy doesn't even need to produce any more units for the rest of this game. He could just push out right now, and with what he has, he would win. So that's the situation we're in right now, and yeah, just a terrible spot for Stork. Here comes the push out from Fantasy. I think he's starting to sense just how few units Stork really has, and he is going. Where is he going? He is going to go for the 4th base, the new base that is up and operational, which is certainly the proper move. Finish off the last mining of Stork and force the GG. As to why it's not, since it's not there yet. And he's pushing in here right now. His science vessels coming in, tanks coming into position as well are going to be able to start picking off everything. And Stork is going to go to the bottom left and try and pick off the base there. You know, he's going to go base for base. I think what he's hoping is that maybe Fantasy's army isn't as big as it really is, and if he can just make it so that way both of them just has to use the army that they have available, maybe his Arbiter Stasis and his Cloak will be able to outwork the science vessels, and he can maybe try and, with good army movement, maybe be a little bit creative. However, that's not going to happen here. Tanks on the low ground are going to make it impossible for Stork to take down that base, and Stork GG's. Fantasy gives SK Telecom 1 the victory and the 2-1 edge in this very, very important series. So 2-1 edge going to SKT as they use their big 3 guns, and we will have to see who remains, if they will send out a Zerg, if they will send out Sun, who will remain for SKT. And we're going to go on to the 4th set. Samson Khan on the ropes. Hopefully we'll see some Jang V action, and hopefully he doesn't get left on the bench, but we will be going on to set 4.